Welcome to the next step, where we seek to pay tribute to some of the most trailblazing prolific people that the country has to offer. And obviously we have the woman of the hour herself. She is a philanthropist and an all-round healthcare leader who has actually dominated the healthcare space in Eswatini for 24 years. And her name is obviously the ever so lovely Miss Echo Nomsa Vanderwell. Mage Nomsa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure to finally get to have this conversation with you. And before we get into the actual heartbeat of the conversation, I think as me and the team were making our way here, something really struck me. You rarely take interviews. There is no record of any local interviews that you've done in the country. Is that really an intentional decision that you've made, you yourself and Dr. Harry, for the past 20 years to sort of like stay out of the spotlight?
Well, what I can share with you is that when we came to Eswatini, we were called by God. It was a calling. And we always felt that what we were doing was for God. You know how they talk about when you get to heaven, you're supposed to throw your crowns at his feet. So we always saw whatever work that we did or whatever God led us to do as those crowns maybe were just for him in heaven. And also there's another verse in the Bible that it says, don't let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. So those are some from the spiritual side, why we're quiet. But from the other side, to be honest with you, we just love people. And when people are sick, we are focused on that. And if we had it our way, we would just work with a bag over our head, no one even knowing who we are. That's our heart. And that's what maybe you've seen or not seen the last 20 years. But it's become necessary. What you learn over time is that if you don't tell your story, someone else will tell your story for you. And maybe not the right story.
And obviously we'll get to that part a little later. I just wanted us to take it to the very initial genesis of the story.
Sure.
I'd like to believe that I'm a hopeless romantic. I love myself a very good love story. And this is actually a manifestation of a good love story. You and Dr. Harry coming into the country in 2004 at the heart of one of the most insane public health emergencies, HIV/AIDS, and obviously Eswatini was leading the pack with the highest prevalence rate globally. Let's just take it back to the very beginning, the genesis of the Luke Commission.
Thank you for that. Actually, the genesis of the Luke Commission started when I was 8 years old. When I was 8 years old, I was sitting in church on the front row. On a Wednesday night, there was a service, and someone was speaking, and I felt God calling me to work in healthcare in Africa when I grew up. Most of the time, maybe kids would be laughed at, but my parents didn't laugh at me. They actually encouraged me to shoot for the sky. Whatever God told me to do, they wanted me to do that. So I'm really grateful for that, because I actually grew up in a poor family. So we could have been limited by that poverty. But because of the way that they raised us, they always raised us with God's limit, which is limitless in mind, not ours. And then when my husband was 17, he had a similar calling. By the way, my husband's very quiet.
Yeah.
Very quiet. And sometimes people don't even know that he's a doctor, board certified in 2 specialties, very smart. Because if he came here, he would probably be sweeping the floor. That's how he is. But God called him when he was 17 to work overseas in healthcare. We met when we were 19. We got married when we were 21, very young. And then we were both in medical school. And then when I had just finished my training and he was still in training, we had triplets. We had 3 kids. And then then we had one more. And when he was 2 months old, we came to Eswatini for the first time. And we flew into the Matsapa airport. It was our first time out of our birth country. In fact, we got the passport just to come to Eswatini. So we came to Eswatini, came to the airport. Someone picked us up from the airport and took us directly to Timbutini, a rural community. And in Timbutini, we saw people dying in every house. And then our hearts were broken. And we asked God, what can we do as two people? And he laid on our heart that we needed to come back over and make Eswatini our home. So that's what we did. But I like the way you put it. It's a romantic story.
Very good one.
Not only with Eswatini, but my husband is very supportive of my dreams, my visions. He's always taking care of the family, which is kind of upside down. But when we got married, he said, if you do the meetings, phone calls, and emails, I'll take care of the family. So that's how we've done things for the last many years. And we've had a wonderful time together.
And obviously, I did mention the fact that you came at a time where the health fiber of the country, the health fabric, was hanging by a very precarious balance with the HIV/AIDS crisis. I mean, what is that specific moment that you can recall where you thought, actually, we can make this, turn this into an actual viable system of free medical assistance?
When we went to the rural areas, we saw that people, it wasn't that they didn't want help, but they want to be treated with compassion. Because I would ask people sometimes, why don't you go to the hospital? And they would say to us, if I have to be treated like that, let me go home and die. And those words crushed me to a point where I understood that the most important thing is compassion. The most important thing is love. And that is the cornerstone. It's the anchor. It's the why we do everything we do, because we want the people who are touched by our hands to feel love first. Then we also recognized that there was a challenge with transport, because most of the people living in rural areas typically are not employed and struggle with transport. And so when we saw those two challenges, we felt like God was telling us to go to the people. In fact, today you're sitting on the Miracle campus. But for the first 8 years we were here, we rented one house in Menzini. We worked from that house. Not because we had to. Actually, I started a business in the United States, and it was very successful. And that's what we were using to do our work for the first 5 years here. We didn't take any donations. We used our own money. So it wasn't, we didn't live like that because we had to. We lived like that because exactly what you said. We saw the health of the nation hanging on by a thread. And we knew if we didn't move quickly, more children would be orphaned, more devastation would be there. So the first 8 years, it was just my husband and I, medical staff, with about 20 local staff, and we moved around to every chiefdom. I can take you anywhere. If there's somewhere you haven't been, just ask me, I will take you there. No, it was a beautiful 8 years, the first ones. I call it the desert with God. Because in some ways we were alone, but we were never alone. And it was such a blessing. Even now, if I go to the rural areas, I ask for my children by name. Where's Luke? Where's Jacob? Where's Zebediah? Where's Zion? That shows you the depth of relationship, that they knew our family by name. So I'm really grateful for the love that we were shown when we were working in the rural areas. And I miss it. I miss it a lot. But I realized over time that if everything depended on us, we weren't doing our job. We needed a team who could work without us, that didn't need us. And so I'm very proud of the team of 500 now. Yes, things have changed, but the heart hasn't changed.
And let's just take it to the heart. I want to expand the conversation around the heart. Take me back to that very house. And you, in some other platform, you came out to say that you used to share the same room with the kids. Take me back to one of the most memorable experiences and memories that you have of that particular time. I mean, the smell, the noise, the visuals.
Well, one thing that I can say, because I know that some of your audience is young people, and I love young people because they're so fresh and bright. I think sometimes we need to remember that most things start small. Most things start in a way that the world might call insignificant. At some stage, I realized that the staff didn't even know where things started, because if you come here, you can look at this place and think this is where things started. But you've mentioned that house in Menzini. The house in Manzini, one room was the pharmacy, one room was the office. We all ate out of that small kitchen. And yes, the 4 boys and Harry and I, we shared one room. But you know what? We were living our dream. We were responding to the calling from God. It didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like what we needed to do because people were dying unnecessarily. If they were on antiretrovirals, what? They will live. If they weren't, they will what? Die. So how can we be bothered by our own comfort in an emergency or a crisis like that? So, but we also recognize that those are the beginning years. You can't stay with that way for forever. Growth has to come. But in that house we had, in fact, my kids cried when we left. They did not want to leave that house. In that house, they had so many good memories. We had such a great time together as a family, as staff. We lived, I call it one pile. You couldn't move without someone else knowing you were moving, you know, and it was really a blessed time. But I was really grateful then when God opened the door in 2013 for us to be able to buy this land. It was a miracle and something we didn't expect. It happened very fast. So we're really grateful for the way God has just led us step by step. I call it the blind steps of faith.
And, you know, obviously before we get into the heart of the Miracle Campus established in 2013, and like you said, it truly was a miracle. But let's just rewind to, I'd like to believe that you've had 4 beasts that you've had to face as an institution. The first one being when you started, the second one being the HIV crisis, you know, in the early 2000s, the mid-2000s when you started, and, you know, obviously the issue of COVID-19 in 2020 and the recent aid cut from the United States. But just take me back to the crisis of HIV AIDS and how you were able to just face that particular health challenge head on as an institution.
I told you that we realized that compassion was critical. If we didn't have that, we couldn't build a bridge to the people. And so we realized that our manner of approach and the way we treated people was the most important thing we did. We also recognized that no one, not you, not me, wants to be treated like a disease. We're not treating HIV, we're treating humans. Humans deserve to be taken care of holistically. So when we approach the patient, it's what's most important to them. Oh, you have a rash? Oh, you have a cough? Let's start there. Knowing that there's other things that we'll have to address as time goes on, but that was our approach. Of course, we're in the middle of a crisis in a country that was unfamiliar to us. We were learning so much. Some people ask my husband one time, he's quiet, but he says very powerful things sometimes. One time they asked him, "You are so unique, TLC is so unique. Why do you think you're unique?" They asked him that. And he said, for the first 3 years, we didn't talk, we worked, and we listened. We learned. It's so important, I think, when you're in a new environment or a new country to learn. You can think you have the answer if you're medical or whatever, but you don't. You need to learn. So those early days were very important for us to learn. Of course, we were in an emergency, so we couldn't not work while we were learning. We had to learn as we worked. And so in those early days, as we all know, things were very difficult, especially in the rural areas where people struggled to get access to care. There were cancers, there were other things that were manifesting from HIV that we don't see anymore. But during that time, things were very, very, very difficult. And so the manner of approach we felt was so important, and taking care of the person holistically, every part of their being. And that is what led us, because if you look at our name badge on the bottom, it says treating every last one as your father, mother, brother, sister, or child. So if you're my brother or my son, I have to say son because I have a son that's a little bit older than you.
Yeah.
If you were my son, how do I want you to be taken care of?
As a VIP.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
It literally changes everything when I see you as a family member. And that, I believe God gave us. One day when we were in a rural area, I remember, because I said to him, things are overwhelming here. There's so much sickness. Things are so devastating. And I remember him saying to me in that quiet moment, take care of people like your own family member. And that ended up being the filter, the guiding light for us till today. Even as I'm sitting here today, every decision we make during COVID, the decisions we were making were, how can we take care of people like our own family members? So maybe if I could just say that it's never been a big thing. It's these whispers that you get from God that guide you to the next step. And that has helped us just to be able to navigate as we've had to make decisions along the way.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that you actually told me off cam is that you're not a big fan of politics, so I wouldn't want to take you into political issues. But I would then love to get your analysis on how the national government handled that particular crisis, the HIV/AIDS crisis, because obviously regionally we saw a lot of African governments grapple with this new scare, and obviously there was a lot of denialism, you know, a delayed treatment and so on and so forth. Are you of the view that the government of Eswatini handled that particular scare prudently?
I think for the whole world, it was a learning curve. There's nowhere you can go in the world where you wouldn't admit that this was a learning curve. For us, it was a learning curve. When we first came to Eswatini, do you know there was no HIV testing kits? There were no antiretrovirals.
Sure.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
So we started building relationships with people on different diseases. Obviously, HIV was right in your face. You could see it manifesting itself everywhere, but you couldn't give it a treatment. Then when the HIV testing kits came in the communities we were working in, understand, we left very early in the morning, and we came back only when everyone was taken care of. Sometimes it was midnight, sometimes it was 2 a.m. We have come through that gate in Manzini at that rented house at 6 a.m. in the morning. So when we finally got to testing kits, we were testing 250 people a day positive in one community. So I think it wouldn't be healthy of me to judge any government, any leader on how they handled the situation, because it was overwhelming. I do believe we can look back on the last 2 decades of history and say that things are much better when it comes to HIV than they were. And I think the nation can be proud of that. As I look back on our operations, are there things we could have done differently, better? Yes. I can say that about probably anyone who's been working in the HIV crisis. But I'm so grateful now that our people have access to health care. HIV is just like any other chronic disease. You can live till 70, 80, 90 with HIV, and that was the dream, that was the vision, and I think we were all working towards that goal. I think if I would have to do over again for myself, we were so focused on the people in the rural areas, we probably didn't do a good enough job of building relationships upstream because we were so focused on the people on the ground. But our intentions have always to be work in harmony with everyone who's working in the country and to hold hands, because we believe collaboration is the only way that we can achieve big things.
And you know, 9 years later, obviously the state-of-the-art facility was finally established. And I do not want to talk about the success. I want us to just reflect on the decision that you made, that actually we need something bigger. Let's speak about this particular dream.
Thank you, Skew. What I can tell you is every decision we've been made is because we saw people who needed a solution. When we were in Manzini, people were coming to our house for health care. And we would ask them if they tried the other neighboring hospitals. And they would say, we've already been there, we're coming to you because we want you to help us. So you know what happened? There was a big tree in the yard. And people would sit under the tree, and we would go out there and take care of them under the tree. And there would be IV drip bags hanging off the branches. Then you realize, if people are demanding this care, we need a proper place to establish ourselves. So we are really grateful that we have a really good board in Eswatini, and they always encourage us to look for property. We had initially looked at some property in Malkerns, but it didn't progress. And so then in 2013, in February, our board chair told us that this land was available. And he asked my husband and I to go look at it. And we got here, you see that pile of rocks right there? We got that far. And again, the Holy Spirit spoke to us and said, this is home. That was on the 9th of February 2013. On the 11th of February 2013, we signed the agreement to buy it. By the way, we didn't have 1 penny for the land. The owner of the land told us that he needs money fast. If we can pay for the land by the last day of the month, remember it's February, only 28 days, he'll give us a 10% discount. We went and wrote a letter to our friends and family back in the United States and Canada. Listen, God opened the door for us to buy this piece of land. If we can buy it by the end of the month, they'll give us a 10% discount. Do you know by the 26th of the month, enough money came for the land? We transferred the money for the land. On the 28th of February, this land was ours.
Sure. Without any support from any external institution in the country.
Just our family and friends in the United States and Canada. And as I mentioned, our own investment from my business in the United States.
But surely around this time, the government had engaged with you to sort of collaborate or assist the facility. Surely they had seen the vision that you had.
Yes, because we had an MOU and all of the regulatory documents were in order. We had a registered nonprofit here. So all of those things, we were partnering together. But as far as the land, this land was purchased by our family and friends in the United States and Canada.
Yeah, and I actually want us to factor in innovation. You are so synonymous with innovation. When I think about the TLC, the first word that comes to mind instantly has to be innovation. How are you able to innovate out of pain, for instance? Let's speak about the intentional innovation that you have as a facility and where it actually comes from.
Well, I think the biggest motivation for innovation is actually pain. If you channel pain to solutions. But most of the time, the world tells us when we have pain, we should complain. Many years ago, God challenged us on complaining. Do you know if it's hot, you can't make it not hot? Do you know if it's cold, you can't make it not cold? Do you know if it's raining, you can't make it not rain? We clutter our lives so much with things that we can't change, and we complain about them. And so God really placed on my husband and my heart, let's have a no complaining policy at TLC. I know it sounds crazy, but do you know they've adopted it overseas? When I speak internationally, they ask me, what are some of your keys to success? I mentioned the no complaining policy. And then they ask to see it, and they've adopted it in first world countries. It doesn't mean we don't talk about our problems, but we only talk about our problems with people who are part of the solution. It changes things. So when pain comes, if we look at that as an opportunity to grow, what is innovation? It's growth, most of the time. And that, I think, has really helped us to leapfrog a lot of our challenges and to build solutions not just for TLC, not just for Eswatini, but beyond the borders of Eswatini.
And, obviously, I said that you faced 4 beasts, and I would want to get into the dead one. Obviously, the issue of the COVID-19 global pandemic, which really tore apart the global health fabric. And, obviously, to factor in the audacity that you seem to have and where it actually comes from. I mean, around this time, you established one of the biggest, in fact, it's the biggest oxygen plants that we have in the region. Where does the sense of audacity in very impossible times come from?
Well, thanks for the question. In fact, during the time, it was almost like building Noah's Ark because everyone was laughing. Can you ever do this? But let me tell you where the motivation came from. We all know that during COVID, it was scary.
Yeah.
We know that when you're scared, you do one of 2 things. You retreat or you advance. I think in the world, in many places, people were scared, and what did? They retreated inside their homes or to a place of safety. TLC has never been an institution that has backed away from challenges. We see a challenge as, we believe that for every challenge, there's a God-given solution. We won't find it ourselves, but if we ask, He will help us to navigate. So when COVID came, of course it was scary, but we didn't want to retreat. So during the first wave, people were coming here. Of course, during that time, it took a long time to get the results of the COVID test, so they would be a suspect at that time. So you didn't know you were holding them as a COVID suspect, but not in a COVID unit. So you had to have that segregation. So we kept taking people who were COVID suspects, and we learned a lot about the disease. In fact, I hate the disease. It's a beast. I remember people would come in and they would tell you, I'm going to die.
Sure.
And 5 minutes later, they would die. Now, I've worked in healthcare for 20 years. 30 years. I've never seen a disease like that before. It literally just took the breath out of people. And why were they dying? They were dying because they didn't have oxygen. Now, in the first wave, we didn't have a problem with oxygen. There was enough because the numbers were low. In the second wave, I realized very quickly, we have a big problem. We don't have enough oxygen. At the time, I think you remember our Prime Minister passed away. I called the acting Prime Minister. I said, we have a big problem. We're not going to have enough oxygen. He asked me, what can we do to try to mitigate that? I gave him my ideas, but the problem was, you can't turn on oxygen when you're in an emergency. You have to plan to turn on oxygen. So the second wave was very difficult. If I can tell you how hard this team worked. And by the way, back then we had a no press policy. We didn't talk to the press then. Not because we were trying to avoid them, because we were busy taking care of people. We had never developed that part of our team. You can see now we have some communications people, some media people, but back then we didn't have that. So we were just taking care of people because ambulances were coming in here nonstop. And I remember when we started to realize we're going to run out of oxygen in the second wave. I asked our team to meet. Let's meet. I said, outside, they're calling us a slaughterhouse. Inside, we know we don't have oxygen. What are we going to do? And we went around the circle in our executive team. There was about 20 people. And I asked them, what are we going to do? And they said, we will not turn one person away. And when it got to the last guy, he said, we might be the last hope of the nation. And when he said that, I realized, what about the name badge? It says, treat every last one as your mother, father, brother, sister, child. What would I do with my mom if she was sick and she needed oxygen, but I didn't have the one thing she needed? Would I push her on the street? No way. So you know what? We turned around and went back to work. And I said, they can call us whatever they want, slaughterhouse or whatever. The truth is, we are going to love people no matter what. We are going to treat them as our family members, and we will not abandon them. So we did that. But we held a lot of people's hands while they died because we didn't have oxygen. So our team, because they see pain as a motivation for a solution, they put their heads together and they said, let's try to build an oxygen plant. We have engineers here who had already been working on a design even prior to COVID. So they pulled all that information up and they started working on it. And they were talking to people all over the world. Of course, most of the world was still sitting in boardrooms trying to figure out what do we do about the fact that there's not oxygen. TLC decided to step out and build an oxygen plant. And on the 9th of June, 2021, for the first time in Eswatini's history, we started producing oxygen at the Miracle campus. And there will never be a day that I know it wasn't a miracle. Our team worked so hard. That plant, I don't know if you've been there, it was built in 52 days.
Sure.
Why was it built in 52 days? It was built in 52 days because there was a team who decided to take a chance and do something that the world said couldn't be done, and do it no matter what. You know April? There's 5 holidays. You know April. They were building during those holidays, during April. And every time I would look at the plant, our construction team would be working on that plant.
Yeah.
And I said to the construction supervisor, where's the memo? I haven't seen a memo for people to work overtime. And he pointed at me, which I know in our culture we don't point, but he did that day. He said, Echo, by the 3rd wave, this plant will be finished. And I believe God used the resilience and the determination of this team here to do something that the world thought couldn't be done. Of course, the oxygen plant has another side of the story. I don't know if you want to leave that one.
I actually want to go into that particular part.
Okay.
The negative perceptions around the oxygen plant. And it's so interesting because the perception or the commentary, the negative commentary, has actually emanated from certain political figures in the country. I mean, when all of that is happening, what is your immediate sense of reaction? Where you hear former ministers of health, for instance, senators, really coming out to posit the most negative things about this idea that you have, this project that you've had.
Maybe if I could just clarify one thing. To me, it wasn't a project.
Yeah.
To me, it was the way to save lives. And it did. It saved thousands and thousands of lives of our Emaswati. What I didn't realize, because I wasn't focused on money. We've never been focused on money or resources. I didn't realize by building the oxygen plant, someone was making money by supplying oxygen. You see?
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, we stepped on those toes. I don't know if I need to unpack this any further. It's very easy to go and follow what happened. I thought we were building an oxygen plant, something that should be a national treasure. And it was, and it is. But to some, it was a threat. And some used their political position for certain business interests. At first, I thought we could find logic, because whenever there's a challenge, I always want to look at data, science, logic. But at some stage, you realize when you can't find logic through science and data, there are other factors that are playing a role in what's happening. And unfortunately, that's what happened in this instance.
And it speaks to the type of relationship that you have with the government, which is actually the next point of conversation that I want to have with you. Do you think that the government has a very stable relationship with the TLC? Do you feel like they have taken you as a stable partner, or is there a sense of fragility between the two entities, the government and the TLC? Because if we can go back to COVID-19, 90% of ICU patients in the country were actually housed in this very facility. Do you think that the government has been a stable partner in as far as your interactions is concerned?
I believe that there are parts of the relationship that could be better. But I believe that the challenges that are obviously played out in the press oftentimes are coming from a handful of actors. The majority of the country, 99.99999%, know the heart of the institution, have probably received help from the institution. I bet you have a family member who's been here.
Yeah.
There's a few people standing behind cameras here. I bet if I asked them, do you have a relative? Do you have a neighbor? Do you have a friend who's been here? What's the answer going to be?
We all have.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we know that the nation at large supports us. We know that His Majesty supports us. We know that we have support of the majority of the nation. What I didn't realize is that as we were responding to the needs of the people, because anything that you see here that's built, there was a program before a building. We built because maybe we were using a warehouse to take care of patients because we didn't have a proper facility built yet. Once we realized that, oh, there's these large numbers of people coming, we need to build. I was just in a meeting the other day. We have so many people coming here for rehab. We have a very good rehab team. So we had to move other people out of a building to give them a bigger space. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I didn't realize as we were doing that, just responding to the needs of people, we were stepping on some toes.
And, you know, speaking about stepping onto certain toes, with everything that has happened, have you ever, for any second or minute, considered selling this place?
Never, ever, for 1 second, have we considered selling this place. And it's not just me, it's the entire team. This land has a soul. This campus has a soul. It has a mandate. Remember I told you we used our own funds? We used the funds of our family and friends from overseas. When we did that, we promised them something. They gave it to us because they trusted us. They trusted us to do what? Use this land and these assets and this infrastructure to care for people's health care and support the innovation and all the other things that we do. Can I, for 1 second, betray them? I have never betrayed the patients, and I will never betray the people who allowed us to serve in Eswatini for the last 20 years. So I'm sorry to the people who think this is a nice place. I also believe that it's a beautiful place. But it came because of hard work. It didn't become because we had money. It didn't become because we had a lot of resources. We took what we had and we stretched it and we stretched it and we stretched it. We've been very efficient in the way that we've operated. I do believe if you think you want to build a healthcare facility or you like this healthcare facility, just go buy a piece of land and build there. But please don't try to take something that someone else has built, because this place has a mandate. It has a soul. We will continue to carry out the mission and vision and calling. You know, we used to take care of 1,000 people a day at TLC. And I'll be very frank with you, I miss them so much. But if we take care of one person a day, we're going to do it with integrity. We're going to do it transparently. We're going to do it with love. We're going to do it with accountability. We're going to do it with excellence. If it's one person a day, or if it's 1,000 people a day. You remember Job? He had everything. And then he had nothing. Did he change? No. We won't change. Even though we understand that politically there's pressure, people want this place. People have come from every angle. Can they buy it like this? Can they do this? Can they do that? Every shape, size, and form you can imagine. And I'm not angry. But I don't think you should try to take something by force.
Yeah.
Especially when that thing is healing people's lives. There are people's lives here being changed. Not just the patients, but us as the staff. We are dedicated to this work. And what I can tell you is that it's not me alone. It's 500 people who are dedicated to this work. So no, in answer to your question, we've never considered, even for 1 millisecond, not even a second, just even 1 millisecond of selling this place.
And you know, you're very big on accountability. And before we actually wrap up this particular conversation, accountability and transparency seem to be two banners in the mandate and at the heart of what you do in this particular facility. Let's speak about the state of corruption in the public health sector in the country, because you do operate within a system that currently has a crisis of mafia-style rot and corruption. You know, if you would suggest solutions to the government to actually overcome all of this rot and corruption within the procurement department of the health sector of the country, what would those particular solutions be from someone who has gotten the mandate quite frankly right?
Thank you for recognizing that in Eswatini. Most of the time, they're recognizing that internationally. In fact, much of what we've done here is being looked at internationally for replication in other countries on a regular basis. Tomorrow I leave Eswatini to fly to another country that wants the accountability you're talking about. And even in Eswatini, we have many leaders in the country that also want that accountability, that also want that stability for the country. Because let's face it, if you're poor and you go to a hospital and you don't find what you need, you feel abandoned. No one wants anyone to feel abandoned. If you really love people, you don't want them to feel abandoned or neglected. So we want to fix that problem. And it's not just me, it's many people in leadership positions in Eswatini that want to fix that. Unfortunately, I go back to that handful of people. It's not the masses.
Yeah.
It's a small number of people who have certain interests that I do not think accountability and transparency is part of what they see as an operating business model. For us, accountability and transparency is the key to our operational business model. I can tell you this year we've had many audits. Like every year we have many audits. They're all clean. Every one of them. Despite what they say. They can say anything they want. I sleep totally fine at night, in peace, because I know the truth. The truth is, we do international audits. There are audits done in Eswatini. They're all clean. I feel that this is the way we're supposed to operate because it allows us to give the best care then to the people.
Yeah.
I also believe that digital solutions are shining light in areas that were difficult to bring accountability to. So our team has really embraced digital technology and advancement, has really embraced innovations, and I believe that's why the nation trusts TLC. I do believe that in the coming probably 2 to 5 years, you will either be accountable because you choose it and it's part of your operating model, or you will be forced. Why? AI and all the things that are entering the marketplace or have already entered the marketplace are bringing accountability digitally in a way that has never been there before. Can I make an example to you? In our procurement system now, if you order 5 Cokes from Spar, it will check how much is a Coke from Pick and Pay, how much is a Coke from Engine, how much, do you understand me? Yeah. AI is running in the background, giving us data like this, telling us why are we buying this Coke for 10 Emalangeni more than we could buy it next door. Now you take that to drug procurement, medical supply procurement, which of course is expensive. Some things are very expensive. So there are some of us who are very excited about that level of accountability and how that can benefit the people. Because when we're efficient, when we're accountable, we can bring a high quality healthcare service at a very low cost. What does that mean? It means the poorest of the poor will access high quality healthcare because we're efficient. That's our dream, that's our vision, that's our goal. I pray that over time, we become more accepting of this in Eswatini, because I believe it could change the trajectory of the nation. In the meantime, as you've seen in the press, many things get said. Most of that is that they're fighting the accountability and transparency here. And we'll continue to take those hits because we believe that it's very important that we demonstrate integrity in everything that we do.
And you know, Nomsa, still on the issue of this very delicate very interesting relationship that you have with the government. This year has not been an easy year as far as aid is concerned. I mean, Donald Trump comes into office in February, that executive order stopping all forms of aid to developing countries who actually rely on aid for health survival. Let's speak about the 50 million emalangeni that the government decided that, actually we can help out. And as far as that is concerned, do you feel truly and prudently assisted, or do you have a sense of, I was fought against just a little?
Well, my answer to that is basically the same as I said before. There's big support and a few that are against. And yes, because the United States government has been very supportive of TLC for 15 years. And by the way, you don't get their support without accountability, transparency, and integrity. You just don't. The standards are very high. The regulations around taking that funding is very high, or very strong. And so losing that at the beginning of the year was difficult. But I felt comfort because in this year's budget, they put TLC in for 50 million emalangeni. And of course, we know that the fiscal year starts on April 1. So, well, maybe I didn't expect it to move April 1. I expected it to move forthwith during the year. And I'm very grateful to Parliament and others who recognize that the institution is bringing some help to the nation. Because what was really difficult for many years, we were getting a lot of outside funding from international donors, but they always ask you, what is government doing to assist? So you need to be able to answer that question well, because most international partners don't want to be alone. They want to be in collaboration with the local government. So this was really good that the government put us in the budget. Unfortunately, that funding has not been released yet. We're in the 9th month of the fiscal year. We're still waiting for it to be released. The Minister of Health did give us a letter recently to say that it would be released soon. So I pray that it's released soon, because as I'm sitting here today, we've stretched now for 9 months. We operated in good faith. We continue to take care of people for free or highly subsidized rates. Even though we're charging something now, 80% of the people are still getting free health care. It's not 100% of people that are paying. There are certain people that are exempted when they come and they do not pay. So we've continued in good faith, knowing that once the budget is signed into law by His Majesty, now it's just an administrative process. But unfortunately, we still don't have that funding, and I did have to meet with the staff yesterday and tell them if the funding doesn't come, that there won't be salaries for December. So it's a very, again, difficult situation, which is not really necessary. So hopefully the funding can be released soon so that we can settle the debts that we have and move forward.
And how bad is the financial crisis that you're facing as an institution?
Well, we again used the cut of funding from the United States government as another opportunity to grow. We knew during COVID, by the way, we did a lot of work during COVID. We didn't really get the resources that represented the work we did. We really believe in a performance-based model. If you do 90% of the work, then at least can you get 40% of the funding, not zero? That's what happened during COVID. So we learned very valuable lessons then. Even though we stepped out on behalf of the nation, there wasn't a true-up, if I could put it that way. We stepped out in a crisis, in an emergency, but then we suffered greatly because we took on all this debt. Even now we have debt on the oxygen plant, which that oxygen plant should have been funded by international funding, but it wasn't channeled our way. So we learned a lot. We went into a lot of debt during COVID. We saved a lot of lives. It was an international story that was very good, but it was very painful financially for us. So we knew during COVID that we needed to pivot. We have to move to revenue generation model where we mix social enterprise with equitable access to healthcare for everyone. And over our years, we of course have expanded the number of services we do. So we do very complex services like laser treatments for eyes and like a lot of things that are very complex that are not available in Eswatini. So you will find we'll be taking care of someone who has a BMW parked in the parking lot because we don't have a way to pay. Does that make sense? So when the funding cuts came, we made a very hard pivot. This was our time now. We knew what we already needed to do. This was our opportunity to pivot and say we're moving to a diversified funding model, which means we're responsible for generating some of our own revenue. We did an asset mapping. We mapped all of our assets. What can we turn on and start to generate revenue? So as much as we have difficulty right now, and we want to take care of the most vulnerable. So we will always need support from our local government, from international partners. That you can't run away from. But we do believe that we should be generating some of our own revenue. So we're working on that. We have some things in the pipeline. Unfortunately, because of some of the challenges in Eswatini, we've had to focus a lot of our energy in other countries. So we are, that makes me sad. But at the end of the day, we have to have a business model that works. And if we cannot get the support necessary in Eswatini, we need to diversify again on diversification to other countries. So we're doing that.
And obviously, before we actually wrap up this very insightful conversation, I do want to expand on the issue of diversification of revenue. I think you've been very intentional this year. There's the TLC Event Center, which is making waves across the creative arts, creative economy space, and also you have Luvelo, brilliant innovation, a game changer. Let's speak about the sustainability plan of the TLC in the next 10 years, where you actually project to see yourself.
Over the years, really since COVID, we have been asked to go to many places around the world and share what happened here during COVID. It was a story that was a miracle. And the world wants to know about it. So we've traveled and talked about COVID. When I go to talk about COVID, you want to know the first thing they ask? How did you get your team to do that? Then I say, I didn't get them to do that. They did that from a heart of calling, from a heart of compassion. So then they ask, what have you used to be able to build a team like that? So it speaks more to the model. It's a model where we're all committed in a unified way, unity being very critical for us as an institution, to high quality healthcare at the lowest possible cost, equitable access to healthcare for everyone. So in the process of doing that, of course, when we were working on this model, we built Luvelo, as you mentioned. We didn't initially build Luvelo for export. We built Luvelo for ourselves. We were trying to solve our own challenges. I'll just give you one example. We built a scheduling module. The first module we ever built was a scheduling module. Why? We realized if the right people are at the right place at the right time doing the right thing, we've solved 80% of our problems. Now, if you put the right commodities through supply chain, you are almost guaranteed success. So you start to realize that the digital platform programs you for success as a staff member. And by being programmed for success as a staff member, you do what? You program your patient for success. When you program your patient for success, you program your families for success. When you program your families for success, you program your communities for success. When you program your communities for success, you program your nation for success. And we are excited about that. And so we've had the opportunity to tell this story around the world. And there are other countries that are interested in doing this. So over the next 10 years, I actually believe TLC can do both. TLC can serve Eswatini and bring solutions to other nations. My prayer is that we can continue to serve Eswatini. Working in other nations is logical. Why? People invite you because they want what you have. In Eswatini, my prayer is that we don't just become a business model that works, but a business model that continues to serve our first love. Our first love being Eswatini.
Mage Nomsa Vendel, you truly have been such a pleasure to speak to. And for the past 20 years, it's such an honor and privilege of how you've actually remained true to your mandate and vision from the very beginning.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you.
And, obviously, that's how we wrap up today's episode of The Next Step. My name is Mlandva Sikumbuzo Gamavimbela. And like the biblical look, the Look Commission has remained true to its mandate to serve with heart, compassion, and dignity.